The International Festival of Arts and Ideas is created and produced on the traditional lands of the Mohegan, Mashantucket Pequot, Eastern Pequot, Schaghticoke, Golden Hill Paugussett, Niantic, and the Quinnipiac, in the land we all call home, Connecticut. We hope that from wherever you are, you take a moment to acknowledge and honor the native people whose land you are on and the history of the place you are in.
The International Festival of Arts and Ideas stands in solidarity with Black and Brown communities and other groups who are targeted and abused by unjust systems of oppression. We support all movements working to decenter white voices and dismantle white supremacy. We are actively seeking to dismantle systemic racism, and we raise our voices with those in our community who are already engaged in this vital work. We commit to working alongside you to create transformative change in New Haven and in our global community.
Good evening and welcome to the International Festival of Arts and Ideas. Thank you for joining us tonight for a discussion of the exhibit of Unsolved, which will be at the Festival Center on the New Haven Green June 11th and 12th. Our partners in this exhibit is Frontline and the Yale Center for Collaborative Arts and Media, or CCAM. Our other festival sponsors are Connecticut Humanities, City of New Haven, Yale University, National Endowment of the Arts, Connecticut Public Media, and Community Foundation for Greater New Haven. Our moderator for this evening is Lauren Dubowski, from the Assistant Director of CCAM.
Hello, my name is Lauren Dubowski, and I am the Assistant Director at the Center for Collaborative Arts and Media, or CCAM, at Yale University. I and CCAM are thrilled to be collaborating with the Arts and Ideas team, including curator Denise Santisteban, media producer Tiffany Hopkins, production manager Tanya Lentini, and others, to bring interdisciplinary artist and director Tamara Shogaolu's remarkable augmented reality installation, Unsolved, to the New Haven Green on June 11th and 12th. Tamara created this piece with her studio, Auto Pictures, in collaboration with PBS Frontline, as part of, in Frontline's words, a major initiative that draws upon more than 2 years of reporting, thousands of documents, and dozens of firsthand interviews. The multi-platform investigation tells the stories of lives cut short and examines a federal effort to grapple with America's legacy of racist killings through the Emmett Till Unsolved Civil Rights Crime Act. The story takes many shapes. And I want to highlight that this includes Tamara's installation, her companion web-based interactive experience, a podcast, and a documentary film. In today's conversation, at the suggestion of Erica Howard, impact producer at PBS, who has also been instrumental in bringing Tamara's project to New Haven, we bring together Tamara and Thomas Allen Harris, who is an acclaimed interdisciplinary artist, professor at Yale, and a member of CCAM's advisory committee. And they will be in conversation around Tamara's installation, as well as intersections in their creative approaches, practices, and projects. I am honored to have worked closely with both Tamara and Thomas, and to have experienced the many contexts and ways in which their artistry makes an impact, and to have this opportunity, along with Arts and Ideas, to introduce them now. Tamara Shogaolu is the founder and creative director of Auto Pictures. She is an international director and immersive artist who strives to share stories across mediums, platforms, and virtual and physical spaces in order to promote cross-cultural understanding and challenge preconceptions. With a track record in featuring her work at film festivals, galleries, and museums worldwide, such as the Tribeca Film Festival, the Museum of Modern Art, MoMA in New York, and the National Gallery of Indonesia, her innovative approach to storytelling has led to sources like The Guardian, Forbes magazine, and Vogue naming her as a leader in the field of new and immersive media. She was a 2018 Sundance Institute New Frontier Lab Programs Fellow, a 2009 Golden Calf nominee, a 2020 Creative Capital Award recipient, and a 2020 Sundance New Frontier John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation grantee. Tamara was a Burton Lewis Endowed Scholar in Directing at the University of Southern California's School of Cinematic Arts, where she graduated with an MFA. She was also a Fulbright Scholar in Egypt, a Luce Scholar in Indonesia, and an Academy Nichols Fellowship semifinalist. And now we're going to watch a video about Unresolved, Tamara's installation.
Hi, my name is Tamara Shogaolu, and I'm a filmmaker and creative technologist. And I'm also the creative director of Ato Pictures, which is a studio focusing on film and neo and immersive media. We've been collaborating with Frontline on a really significant and socially relevant project called Unresolved. Unresolved is a multi-platform experience. It's composed of a podcast, a film, and I've been responsible for the interactive web experience and the traveling augmented reality installation. When designing this project, I was really inspired by looking at the role of the tree as a symbol in American history and the ability to design an experience that mixes art and technology with powerful investigative journalism to bring to life the stories of victims of racially motivated murders. Now here's a preview of Unresolved.
All I can do is just hear my mama calling Jackson, Jackson, Jackson. I've heard her got abducted and beat to death, and nobody has ever been tried for them.
Mr. Speaker, the time has come. There are hundreds, maybe even thousands of these crimes that were never brought to justice. There are murders who have walked free for decades while the families of victims cried for justice. Passing this bill is the least we can do. And we must do something to right these wrongs.
When we think of family trees, we look at it as a connector between generations, but also there's the dark history of trees and the associations with racial terror in American history. And I wanted to kind of reclaim that to turn these into beautiful spaces.
FBI, the Department of Justice, somebody knows something.
In later years, I asked questions about what happened.
I wanted to allow audiences to participate in the memorializing of these individuals who lost their lives tragically.
Roman Ducksworth Jr.
By exploring the different chapters and the stories of these individuals, the audience member actually literally acts as a source of light to the experience. Often when we talk about the civil rights era or racially motivated murders, it feels like it's something from another time. I think that using technology to bring it to the now and also have it exist in a physical space is something really powerful. The way that I've designed the experience, you have to say the name of the person in order to be able to access their story. Herbert Lee. And learn about their cases and hear from their next of kin. And the idea is that all 151 names are surrounding us.
If people forget who we are, as they have in the past, we'll remind you, because we are going to be here. We're always going to be here.
I really truly believe in the depths of my soul that if we're going to have peace, if we're going to have healing, everything must come out. We must tell the whole story, the complete story.
And now I would like to introduce Thomas Allen Harris, a filmmaker and artist whose work across film, video, photography, and performance illuminates the human condition and the search for identity, family, and spirituality. In 2009, Thomas founded Digital Diaspora Family Reunion, LLC, or DDFR, a socially engaged transmedia project that has incorporated community organizing, performance, virtual gathering spaces, and storytelling into over 75 unique audio-visual events in more than 65 cities. DDFR culminated in the national broadcast of Family Pictures USA on PBS, garnering an audience of over 5.3 million, and it was critically received by the New York Times, the LA Times, and the Chronicle of Philanthropy. He continues to speak and teach on the value of the family photo album as a tool for social change and is on faculty at Yale University. In 2021, Thomas launched the Family Pictures Institute for Inclusive Storytelling to spread the work he has been engaged in over the past 10 plus years and expand upon it through robust research, evaluation, scholarly discussion, and artistic interpretation. The Institute is funded by the Ford Foundation, Heinz Endowments, Wincote Foundation, and will be housed at Yale University. Welcome to Tamara and Thomas, as well as everyone joining us online. So I want to start off with a question for each of you to get the discussion going. And I'll start with Tamara. Thank you again for joining us and for sharing Unresolved with the New Haven community. I was moved hearing about this project from you as you were creating it and began to share it around the country. Beginning with your premiere at Tribeca Immersive last year. And I'm really looking forward to experiencing it in person myself on the New Haven Green. Will you tell us more about Unresolved and your creative process, and especially how you use technology and storytelling to create, as you named it, a living quilt? And also how the audience can expect to interact with the piece and what you hope they will take away from it.
Yeah, I guess as I started working on this project, I was handed a series of cases, like all the names on the list had a sort of like case profile. And I spent some time reading through those. And while that was happening, it was amidst the George Floyd protests of the summer of 2020. And I just started kind of reflecting on the cyclical nature of these stories. And many of the stories that I was reading in those cases were things that I was reading in the news today. And as I was working on the design of this experience on how do I share these 152 stories in a cohesive way that isn't overwhelming, but allows us to sort of have a personal connection and interaction with each individual story. I started thinking about sort of traditions. The majority of the people on the list were African American. And I started looking at African American traditions of storytelling. And that's when I started looking at quilts as a way of storytelling, and looking at how when we weren't allowed literacy by law, weren't allowed to read or write, quilting was a sort of way of documenting and looking at quilts as an archive in a way. And I started thinking about how technology could allow us to explore a quilt. Like, what if you could actually move throughout a quilt? What if you could interact with the different patches on a quilt, if that was the language in the way that you were crafting this? So that was kind of like my process. And then as we kept working on it, because I was responsible for two parts of the project, which were the augmented reality sculpture interactive experience, and then the web interactive. Through the web interactive, I started kind of looking a little bit at this cyclical nature, and I came across this realization that the tree as a symbol in the US has a lot of meaning. I spent some time living in Indonesia, and there I had visited a community where people bury their children in trees because trees are seen as a way of extending life forever, because trees never die. So I was thinking about how in the African American community, we often fear trees, or trees are seen as a symbol of racial violence. They remind us of lynching. And how, even growing up, like I was always afraid of going into like wooded areas, especially if you were in the South or like in Virginia. I remember it was always something in the back of my mind. And I thought it was really sad that we were kind of separated by violence from nature when so many other cultures in the world look at trees as symbols of longevity, of celebration, of eternal life, and intergenerational connections. So that inspired me to want to create a memorial forest for the web interactive that allows you to bring light, and the audience literally acts as a source of light throughout the experience and brings this forest to life in the process. So that was kind of my process as I went through it. And in general, I like to sit with the stories when I'm doing nonfiction work and design from there and see how technology and the art direction can help support and highlight what these stories are trying to say.
To come into a space where you're literally surrounded by the names of people who are victims of racial violence. Anyone can just read about, something tragic that happened to somebody, but you automatically become this much closer to them when you have to say their name out loud. They become a much more real person to you. Their experience becomes much more rooted in your own reality.
You're bringing a voice, and I have to say their name to acknowledge them, to let them know that they're here, even though they're not here, that they're heard, they're seen, and they're cared about, whether or not they're not here.
You now carry these stories with you and can return to them anytime. You have reached the end, but it is only the beginning.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tamara. And would you like to speak more to, I know that you have presented Unresolved in a few places now, and I wonder what you've seen or what you hope audiences will take away from participating in the experience of the installation.
Yeah, I mean, the feedback has been really incredible. It's varied, it premiered in Tribeca, and it was exhibiting outside in Battery Park. And I would go sometimes and just sit there and watch how people were interacting with it. Because I still wanted to perfect things. So I would see if there were any issues in the user experience or things that I could still maybe fix to make sure as it continued to tour, it would be great. And so I was just watching people interact with that. And I saw a lot of people come back every day. They would come during their lunch break, and they would interact with different stories and do learn about different people's cases. And it was really kind of beautiful to see that people were still coming back and just having these sort of quiet, reflective moments where they were interacting with these stories. I had a chance to also meet some of the family members and descendants of people who were on the list. And I remember there was this one really moving moment where the grandson of one of the gentlemen on the list, he never got the chance to meet his granddad. But he took a photo with the name of the granddad on the panel. And I realized that for this family, sort of this investigation and this sculpture also acted as a physical memorial and an acknowledgement and a connection to his grandfather. And that was something that I don't think I had really realized until I saw that, and was really impacted me a lot. And since then, I've gotten messages from other people who've had relatives who died in potentially racially motivated cases that are still unresolved, asking how they can learn more, or thanking me for making it, even though their family name isn't on the list, but somehow they feel a sense of acknowledgement that this is done, that this has happened in a way. So I think seeing that impact has been really beautiful in the process. And I hope that, now that lynching has the lynching law has kind of just been passed, and that this can raise more attention into like, what are these racially motivated murders? They're continuing to happen. If we look at what happened just a few weeks ago in Buffalo, and I hope that things like this can help us really like see how connected the past is to the future, and not allow us to keep this myth, I guess, that people sometimes think that the civil rights is when, racism and this type of violence ended. But unfortunately, I think a lot of it is still going on.
Thank you. Yes, and it will be exciting and I'm sure meaningful to see how audience members in New Haven become part of the project through getting to experience it. And I want to ask a question for Thomas now. Thomas, we are so glad to have you with us today. And it strikes me that your own interdisciplinary work, which includes filmmaking, also installation art, performance, centered around your family pictures methodology, shares with Tamara's work a powerful approach to community, the archive, and memory, and also has an emphasis on dialogue and interactive or participatory experiences. So I want to ask if you would speak to these and other related connections. And I know we also want to share some examples from your practice and your work, including your film Through a Lens Darkly and your family pictures methodology.
Thank you, Lauren, and for inviting me and moderating this conversation. It's really exciting to be back in dialogue with Tamara. We had you, I think, a year and a half ago to Yale and to present in some of your work, and I'm really, just really great to hear and witness the evolution of your practice. And, particularly at this historical juncture, where there is so much difficulty around how do we memorialize, around violence, around trauma and forgotten histories. And so that's something that is really so much a part of my own practice. And so I'm looking forward to seeing Unsolved. I haven't experienced it yet. I am, a big part of my work is also participatory. I am interested in lifting up stories that have been buried. I really appreciated Tamara's two metaphors. One is the tapestry, or the quilt rather, and how our stories are so integrated with one another's stories, and between the present and the past, and particularly at this historical juncture again, where a lot of these stories are now forbidden to be taught in schools in a certain number of states, and for artists to take the mantle in many respects and show these histories and invite people to participate in these histories, which are still with us, I think is really critical, and that's something that is a motivating force for my own work. I made a film, Through a Lens Darkly, Black Photographers and the Emergence of a People, which I'll show a little clip of. And it talks about my own family's relationship, both to photography, but also to memory, and particularly the stories that that are kind of lingering, but in some ways just out of reach. It wasn't until I came out to my grandmother and her sister that they revealed to me that they had a first cousin who was my namesake, or I'm his namesake in some ways. Their name was Thomas, but they went by Sugar, and they were disappeared and murdered, rather. And if I had not verbally come out to them, that story would remain buried. And in many ways, that's very similar to the notion of the archive. If we're not, as artists and as filmmakers, if we're not acting on the archive, it is inert. And so I think it's really important right now in this present moment for us to, as artists, to kind of create what I call a kind of secular yet sacred space, where we can come together and witness and hear. I was really moved by Tamara's description of a descendant of one of the people in her piece. And so I'll show this little clip and then come back and talk a little bit about the process.
I came to Vandersea through my grandparents' wedding portrait, prominently displayed in their home. It was a symbol of my grandfather's pride in our people, a testament to an enduring love, untainted by time.
My first show was called The Good Life. It's basically about the notion of the nation using the UNIA flag, the Universal Improvement Association, as being the trope, the red, black, and green. And it was about notions of, let's say, the family of African heritage, but also unspoken issues around, like, say, pleasure and the body and sexuality. I come from, and we help to create a family in which those issues, can be negotiated.
Ironically, in all the images my grandfather had taken, there were no images of my grandmother's first cousin, whose name was also Thomas, but who went by Sugar. Sugar dressed in drag, frequenting the clubs of Harlem's gay underground. My grandfather had to bail her out of jail on many occasions, until one day they found Sugar dead under mysterious circumstances. Why were there no images of Sugar? Yet there are photographs of my father's aunt, my great-aunt Eunice, who also lived her life out in the open, though it was never spoken about or given a name.
I'm one of the lucky ones who's part of my family album.
The family photo album is a place where the family represents itself to itself, but it doesn't represent certain things. Sexuality can be represented in certain kinds of ways and not other kinds of ways.
These are self-portraits that I made in my late teens and 20s. They embody for me such a moment of exploration and innocence. I think that they need to be seen. There's constantly this debate about whether it makes a difference who makes the picture. Yeah, it makes a difference who makes the picture. The work of Black women photographers speaks to me in a way that no other work really can.
So a lot of my work has really mined my family album and my family, kind of the oral history of my family. And part of my family, my grandfather actually, I grew up with him and my grandmother, but my grandfather was an amazing storyteller. So he downloaded all these stories, multi-generational stories to me, and he was also photographing. My grandmother was really mom. I mean, she didn't say, why do you want to know that? And so to get that piece of information from her was really special. And that story about sugar. And so, I know that Tamara, you have collected a lot of oral histories as part of Unresolved. And so, the tension between, having a wealth of material versus people who don't have any material, and people that might want to talk, and then people who don't want to talk. And how do you negotiate that, in this larger kind of framework as well?
Yeah, I think, well, for Unresolved, I was really lucky because I was partnering with Frontline, and StoryCorps. And I really love StoryCorps' approach to collecting interviews, where they have, you're interviewed by a close relative or friend. So it was really beautiful being able to hear some of that audio and interviews of like different generations, like a father and son speaking to each other. One of the cases actually is from Connecticut, and the oral history is of the son, basically the grandfather who was killed, and then the grandson, talking about how this has impacted things intergenerationally. And I've definitely had the experience that you've had. I've tried to collect oral histories within my own family, and I find that it's even harder for some reason. I think that people sometimes are more willing to share and open up to people that they don't know so well, than to people that they're close to. I tried to do interviews with my grandmother, and she also was like, why are you interested in this? But luckily enough for Unresolved, there was a wealth of interviews and a big team. The project is based on like 15 years investigation. So I think what was interesting in the process was having like, official documents that were biased, like from the FBI and from police departments, also form part of an archive of an individual's life. And versus how they're described by their family or relative or friend, and seeing that sort of difference in the way that the person who can't, is not alive to speak for themselves is being shaped, was something that was really interesting as I was like crafting these spaces and spaces for people to explore and learn each story. For sure.
Yeah, and I when I hear about your project, I also think about Brian Stevenson's Equal Justice Initiative, which is like one place that's rooted in the South, and so my project, Family Pictures USA, travels around the country, and I think that with artists who are working in these different spaces as well, that have this kind of ability to do these kind of pop-ups, if you will, or like to be kind of like shifting across the landscape. I think there's some power in that, so that it allows for people, and there's power in both of them, but it allows for people to be able to encounter things where they are, And although I really want to go down and see Brian Stevenson's Equal Justice Initiative, and so could you talk a little bit about what people might encounter and how they might encounter it in Connecticut versus other places?
Yeah, I mean, I had a chance to visit the Equal Justice Initiative, and it was, wow, it was like really incredible space. I mean, I was really moved with how they were able to utilize like design and architecture in a way that it was telling a story, and that had such emotional impact. With the sculpture garden, I was really, really, really moved. Luckily I went there at the end. Like I just went there this summer as part of research for another project. And I know that part of the Frontline team went there at the beginning as they were looking into this. And yeah, like going there and seeing how, like how it was structured in a way of like showing basically how each generation has been impacted by this legacy of slavery. And how basically like, it ends with, the present, prison system, and like how it's kind of a modern day version of trying to keep people in slavery, essentially, and how different forms of violence are about that type of oppression, was incredibly moving. But I think that relating to your question about like, do people geographically have different reactions to it? I don't know. I think that's a really good question. I've only been with the piece in New York and in the Netherlands, and so I haven't been in the South with it. But I recently spent a lot of time in the South, because I'm researching for a new project that I'm doing that's about sort of like about Black farmers and the younger generation of Black farmers who are moving back to the South. And people, like, there's a mix. I feel like sometimes people are like very scared to talk about some of these stories. And then bit by bit, things start coming out. Like I was talking with my dad, and then I found out that, an uncle of mine, like the way that he ended up in Chicago was because they were sharecroppers. And then somebody was like, we're going. And then he left. And then he didn't go back for like 15 years because he was scared that something would happen to him because he just left the field. And this was like post-slavery. So people, I think that sense of fear like still exists a little bit, where people don't maybe necessarily talk as openly about racism, which I was surprised about. I think in the North, people tend to be more open, in terms of directly calling racism what it is. And in the South, like when I was doing some of the interviews, people wouldn't even mention like white or Black. They would just be like, people who are not like us, like using euphemisms to describe things, because there's still the fear of repercussion. And I guess being in a small town, that something will happen to you. But yeah, I would be really curious. I'm really curious to see, like, as it's been in the South, and I hope I get the chance to be able to speak with audiences when it's in those spaces as well. But I wanted to ask you also, with your when your grandmother started telling you about sugar, like how did she tell you this story? Like, did you ever ask her like why she chose to tell you about this one, or in what context? Or yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you for asking that. Well, it was actually it was her oldest daughter, my aunt, who told me initially about sugar, because she was young. She was old enough to remember my grandfather bailing sugar out of jail for cross-dressing when it was illegal in the 40s. And then I asked her and my grandmother's younger sister about it, and I kind of told them I came out verbally, even though everyone knew, because I had my partner with partners with me at home. It was very accepting, but both of them started talking about sugar, and like to the point of the notion of memorials, and they started singing the songs that Sugar used to sing when they would come to the house, and how Sugar's hair was like in these waves, and the brownness of the skin, and the like just the beautiful chocolate skin, and just it was like they were describing like a bouquet coming to their home. And so for to understand that I had, that was in my 30s, to wait till I was deep into my 30s to hear about this, and that I wondered to what extent, because of the trauma, they didn't talk. Sugar was brown skin, from the brown skin side of the family, and the other side of the family was a part of the family that had been kind of almost like taken by white slave owners and their descendants, and there's a group of women who were constantly in the South that were known as the issue, the issue of these, and so they were light, not by choice, and so there was a lot of silences on that side of the family. And I guess that part of my understanding and my desire, rather, to do the Family Pictures project is to kind of give a space to unearth those and heal. Because if there was silence, I've got to believe there's also a sense of shame, fear and shame. You were talking about fear and the idea of shame, of not being able to, shame of not being able to tell one story, or not being able to control the fate. My grandmother was from the only member of the family from the South, and all the other parts of the family were either from the North or from the Caribbean. And so I don't have a connection, and I was interested in your notion of the tree, because I live in the Hudson Valley. So I live right near the Appalachian Trail. So I'm always on the trails. So I don't have that connection with the tree in the same kind of way. It's like the South is the tree for me. It's like, I've never really spent that much time in the South. And what's interesting, also, is that in North Carolina, a friend of mine came up to visit, a colleague who was in the North Carolina episode, and she said most of the people she met in New Haven were from North Carolina. And so it will be interesting to see, people from North, and there's that very strong connection. And so it'd be interesting to see how Unresolved plays, in Connecticut, which also has this deep, deep connection to North Carolina, apparently.
Yeah, and I think a lot of these cases are also like what I learned in the process was that, this is the source of the Great Migration, because there was like a period where there were so many killings that it was actually dangerous. People were fleeing. And it really was like people were becoming refugees in their own country. And as I started looking into, how issues of forced migration, which is something that, I've dealt with in the past and some of my other projects, I'd never really looked at Black communities as being forced to migrate, essentially. And I'm seeing the same thing kind of happening now. And I guess that the reason, I don't know, the beauty of archival material is that I think they're I look at them as little frozen moments from time, but it's time is actually frozen, and you're able to witness that flash, but then from there you're able to see connected to the past before that moment was frozen, and the future. And I'm curious if in your work, as you got to know Sugar and looking at the archival, do you feel like you got to know Sugar more, or did it just leave you with more questions? I'm really curious.
Yeah, well, I recorded that piece with my grandmother, and I started looking, and it did influence me to include that story in Thrill Ends Darkly, because I got that story. I think that story was recorded before my grandmother died in 91, and I finished Thrill Ends Darkly in 2001 she died, and I finished Thrill Ends Darkly in 2014. So I was interested in what was hidden in the family album because of fear, as you mentioned, or shame. And so I know that is a project that I need to do. I need to both search the police records, and that's something I was excited to talk with you about Unresolved, because there are people who were killed, because of racialized violence, but there's also, the kind of orientation and sexualized violence as well. Mm-hmm. And yeah, and so I know that is something I need to do, and I'm so glad that we're actually having this conversation, because it has to be higher up on my list of priorities. Yeah, I know it'll take me on a journey too.
I think that's a really good point, though, that intersection. And I think that when I was looking into the cases, I started seeing the intersection of like, when looking at celebrating the lives of these individuals instead of just focusing on their death. I started seeing things where, like, there was a Black gay activist from Utah who was on the list. And I would have never thought that somebody would be advocating like gay rights in the 1940s as a Black man in Utah. And these are names that we never hear about, like, I mean, Marsha P. Johnson was erased as well. And then as I started reading more, there were farmers who were killed for basically just owning too much land, or for arguing over a cow, and somebody, instead of being celebrated for being like a great innovator of farming and being successful for that, or so many people who'd lost their lives just for voting. And I feel like, I don't know, like, we look at it, and when you look at it contextually now, we're even with what's happening with the large numbers of like Black trans women who are being killed, and I think it's the intersection of these identities as well that impacts things as well.
Mm-hmm. And how important they are to bring into the family album, which is something I work with. And I know Lauren has a question as well. I want you to feel like you're part of this conversation. No, since you work so closely with both of us.
No, it's great. I'm really enjoying hearing from both of you, and some of what you're sharing I know, and some of it's new. So I'm really happy to listen. I'm also happy to ask more questions. As you have more questions for each other, you're also more than welcome to ask. I think one thing I want to offer is another connection that you share as artists that I found really inspiring in knowing you and working with each of you, is the inclusivity of your work in terms of inviting everyone into these experiences or films or discussions that you create and offer to collaborators, to audience members, community members. And I think that inclusivity also extends to the tools of storytelling. So it strikes me that you both have worked with public media. For example, you've worked with traditional filmmaking, and I know that both of you explored new ways of telling stories. Tamara has done really amazing work and leadership in the field of animation, of course, mixed reality work. Thomas, I know that you're exploring new ways to use technology as a tool for storytelling and creation in your work. So I wonder if you would like to speak to how technology plays into your work. And, I think we all know that there are things about technology becoming such a huge part of our world and our lives that are powerful in a dangerous way, and that are also powerful in a productive and positive way. And I'm just curious how you both see technology as a tool among others in your creative work.
Well, I think that Tamara, you're much more in the space of technology, so maybe I'll just go first since mine will be a little bit shorter. For me, a lot of it has to do with the intersection of photography and film. And so, and community storytelling. So with the project Family Pictures USA, I actually help activate people's family photographs in this a methodology that we created called community photo sharing. And so, for instance, when I went to Southwest Florida, I interviewed a variety of different communities and brought them together, including the Seminoles, and had them. A lot of people don't think that Native Americans have photographs, that go all the way back, and so I guess I could just show a really brief clip. Family Pictures USA. Once you see America through Family Pictures, you'll never see this country the same way again.
Leroy Osceola is a Miccosukee artist who lives with his family on land settled by generations of his ancestors, who descended from the Seminole Nation.
I wanted to just thank everyone for hosting myself and our team with Family Pictures. We are starting to look at environments and neighborhoods through the lens of the family photo.
She likes pictures a lot, like in her house. She has like a lot of her family.
Yeah.
This is a favorite. Yeah. Is this you here?
No, that's my father.
That's your father?
And his brothers.
Oh, wow.
She said that's why she likes it.
That's her man, she said.
This is her man?
Yeah.
She's smiling. This is an ancestor of yours?
Yeah. I'm the 5th generation.
5th generation?
Yeah.
And what is his story?
He was doing the same thing we're doing. He was protecting the people and the culture and everything. There was a couple of people that had different bands. They were attacking the soldiers because they were attacking us. So he was one of them that led one of the bands. They caught him under the flag of truce. It's supposed to be a meeting, but they caught him under that, put him in prison. The paper said, sign it and leave Florida and never look back. So that's when he stabbed the treaty, saying that no white man's going to tell me where to live or how to live. He said he was a Seminole, so that's when he stabbed the treaty. Seminole means being native, the way you were made, your beliefs. In Florida, it's only Miccosukee and Creeks. We have different languages and different customs.
When the younger people look at this image, what kinds of things come to your mind?
Just overall strength and pride. And then not so much the pride as in boastful type of thing. It's more of just overall perseverance, through everything that people have gone through, over time, in war and in peace. So that's what I see.
It's because life was not very easy back then.
Not at all. Even in current situations, if you want to live traditionally, it's very sacrificing as opposed to the easy way of things are that modernization has brought up.
What is the difference between the life that your parents and you have established here versus, let's say, on the reservation? Is there a big difference culturally?
Yeah, it's a lot slower here.
Over
there, everything develops real fast, and everybody has like all the new things and stuff like that. But here, it's always been like this ever since I can remember growing up.
Yeah, on the reservation, everyone's divided into their homes. The purpose of a camp, it was to keep the families together because that's what our culture teaches you your family is.
What is your vision for your children?
Well, the main thing is that they still have their own territory because they're always trying to take it away, the government. They're always coming up with regulations for their own people and expect us to abide by it like white people, and we're not. That's why I'm saying these words today. So, like I said, they're not digging us up trying to say how they live, what they believed, and all that. So they can hear for themselves what we believe.
It was really powerful because we got this kind of ancient technology, which is oral history, and with the photographic technology, and allowed for people to be able to tell a story multidimensionally and multi-generationally. I personally am looking forward to the potential of a possibility of collaborating with Tamara on the project we're doing, the Family Pictures Institute for Inclusive Storytelling around the country. We're starting in Pittsburgh, and I've been just learning so much about that particular city. And so, as I throw it to you, Tamara, I would love to, at some point, I'd love to also think about ways in which, we could figure out collaborative ways of working together.
Yeah, I would love to. I had a really interesting session recently. I was doing a workshop for like a group of leaders, like young leaders of interest in the Asian region. It was something for the Asia Foundation, and as we were discussing like the role of technology in their works, and they're like leaders across a bunch of different fields, I realized that, this is like Gen Z age, and they're all very like they have this sort of like backlash against technology. And in terms of like, I remember there was one girl from the Philippines who was talking about, well, Facebook is like creating violence in my country. And people are just talking about all of the repercussions of like how data and algorithms have been creating conflict and creating more problems. And the younger generation is seeing it as like a source of issues. It's also like, they're internalizing a lot of issues when it comes to like beauty and standards and all of these things. So they wanted to go as far away from it. And then I started kind of discussing with them more about like, how do they define technology? And I think that we often forget that, a camera is technology, like when it was created. A radio is technology. Like it doesn't need to be like, we get to shape it. They're like tools, new tools, basically any type of new tool is a technology. And I think that when you start thinking about it in that way, you get more control over it being a tool rather than giving into whatever sort of construct is being made around the subject. And something that I'm really passionate about and concerned about, to be honest, is the issue of the tech divide, where, I was recently in the South. I spent some time in Mississippi, and I was meeting with farmers, and I learned that there's a group of Black farmers who have no access to internet. I mean, there's tons of people in America who don't have access to internet, and they have to do these courses to get certified through an app that they need to be connected to the internet. And you wouldn't think that a country like the US would have regions where people have no access to the internet. And as people continue talking about moving into, more like I was in Central America recently, and I was talking to somebody who's big in crypto, and they were talking about wanting a future where everything is on the blockchain. And I was like, then you talk to the next person, they're like, oh, sorry, I don't have WhatsApp because I can't afford data right now. So I'll get some data next week. And I'm like, how in this world can we create these spaces where everything is defined by connectivity and certain types of technologies for certain types of people that will exclude the rest of us? And when I started looking and thinking about Unresolved and quilts, and how quilts, was a way of communicating and documenting our presence when we weren't allowed to read or write, like I'm seeing is not being able to utilize these new technologies or be connected to it, the new sort of literacy that we're being excluded from, particularly communities of color. So I think that that's one of the main reasons that I really find that it's really important to connect technology to a lot of the projects. And even when I tend to do multi-platform projects, because I want to increase the access, and I want to try and invite people to be able to use this technology and remove this fear, and show them that they have the power. This is a tool for them. And if something is intimidating you, or you feel like you're like, the worst thing is when somebody's like, oh, I don't know, I'm stupid, it's not working for me. I'm like, no, the design is stupid if it's not working for you, because it's supposed to be working for you if it's designed properly. And I would love to be able to like contribute to changing that conversation. And I think that these types of stories told through technology can help with that.
Yeah, and I would also just add that I think it's important for me to not just have as a filmmaker and artist working in nonfiction, not just have a kind of broadcast component, but to have like live engagements, but also to do installations in public art, and so I'm really excited, that for the Resolve to be available to people, even though it's engaged with the technology. With Family Pictures USA, we're talking with Carnegie Mellon University about creating augmented reality and as well as an interactive web-based documentary. And so, thinking that, what we did with the prior iteration of the project, it was an hour-long television series. And even though we interviewed over 100 people in each particular location that we did it in, the focus, we were interested in impacting audiences and impacting participants, and a lot of the producers we were working with were like, well, do we need to speak to that many people? But people were completely engaged and they were transformed in the process, and we have a relationship with them. And so while the hour-long show has this kind of life on television, the ways in which people were impacted, personally, and the possibilities for going back to these locations with an interactive installation is very, very appealing. And I think that's where things are heading. And so, which is why I'm really excited to see it resolved.
Yeah, and I just want to add, thanks Thomas and Tamara, for your thoughts on this. And I just want to add and emphasize that Tamara's web-based interactive component of Unresolved that's accessible to everyone online, correct, Tamara? Yeah. So maybe we can ask the Arts and Ideas team to share the link to that. And PBS has made that available. So and I think what you're both talking about, the different ways of telling stories, different points of access and entry. Sometimes people are able, there may be audience members who can see every component of Unresolved. There may be audience members who choose to see one component, or, they're in New Haven and they see the project there because, they have, it's going to be outdoors on the New Haven Green, and they happen to walk by and, see that they can experience it. I think that's really innovative and valuable approach, and I can see that those approaches also in the Family Pictures multifaceted methodology that you've developed, Thomas. So I think we may be coming to a close to this dialogue between Tamara and Thomas. I would love to continue for much longer, but for today, I think we are at time. So is there any other last statements or comments or questions that you want to offer at this time, Tamara and Thomas?
I guess I would just say I invite the audience to check out Unresolved, like you said, on the web, or the sculpture, and visit our website to see some of the other experiences that we've also designed, which is autopictures.com. Yeah.
Great. I'm looking forward to it. And I would like to invite the audience to check out Through a Lens Darkly. It's now on PBS, streaming again. And also our Family Pictures USA series is also on PBS. And you can also check out elements of it on YouTube and on social media, and follow us on Family Pictures USA on Instagram.
Fantastic. And I just want to say thank you again to you, Tamara, to you, Thomas. I'm really happy that we could be together today and hear so much from both of you. I also want to express my appreciation again for the Arts and Ideas team, and especially Denise, when I had the opportunity to connect with you and suggest Unresolved for the festival this year. I imagined, could imagine it on the green and how audiences might find so many things, so many points of connection and in their own experiences through this work. And I'm so happy that it's going to happen. And thank you to everyone who's worked from Arts and Ideas to make this dialogue today possible. And I also want to thank my colleagues at CCAM, especially CCAM Director Dana Karwas, who is supportive of this collaboration, and also Randall Rode, who connected me to Denise. And we appreciate everyone who joined us today in the spirit of Arts and Ideas' theme this year, which is Connect. And we do hope to see you on the New Haven Green on June 11th and 12th to experience Unresolved. And also hope that you will stay in touch with CCAM, Arts and Ideas, Tamara and Thomas's work, and continue to join us for other events and projects and programming. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, and be sure to come and experience the exhibition of Unresolved at the Festival Center on the New Haven Green, June 11th and 12th.